All right, so in our art journal sketchbook exploration, last but not least, I have to share with you altered books. They have been some of my favorite to explore over the last decade. And so, and I come back to them all the time in my studio, and I use them in different ways. I kind of go in and out of seasons of using them regularly, and yet even in seasons where I'm not actively using one of my altered books, I will have one that's always kind of next to me, and I'll prep pages from other things that I'm working on, and I'll show you some of that. My very first altered book was when I first came back to my art practice, a real conscious art practice, when I was leaving my job as a nurse, and I was dropping back to part-time, and I was just kind of trying to revive my sense of being an artist, that calling that I've always had. And so I took an art journaling workshop, and Gretchen Miller, who's an art therapist, she had us work through some different activities, and she had us go get a child's chipboard, illustrated chipboard storybook. And so that was my first experience, I think, with an altered book as an adult. And so I went and I found one, and then I worked through her workshop with these pages. So the chipboard, the children's books that you can find at a thrift store or whatever, or wherever, they're nice because they have these really thick chipboard pages, right? So they're going to handle everything really well. What you want to be aware of is if they have a real shiny surface on them, you might have to do a little sanding or a little gessoing so that your acrylic paint, sanding and then gessoing, so your acrylic paint doesn't just chip off. Or if you don't really care about that, just kind of go at it and see what happens. Use your glue and your collage and your painting and what have you. So chipboard, children's books, chipboards make wonderful altered books. That one, I didn't really incorporate anything of the design on the pages, but I used that surface of the chipboard book. Now, some people will use certain types of magazines. This is not a standard size magazine. This is, what's the name of this magazine? Parabola. And I kept a few copies around, and then I decided I would try to turn one into an art journal. I didn't get very far with it. I did prep a few pages. It has kind of a nice thickness. The more of a base coat you put on in your altered books, the better. I can't really speak to how this would hold up over time because I didn't really work with it too much. My mom did a page in it. But magazines that are made of good quality, and you know that the binding's pretty decent on it, can be wonderful altered books to make, and like really easy to carry with you too. Art books are some of my favorite altered books, and this is one that I've had going for a little while, a couple years. I've only done a few things in it, but I love that it's kind of this square format. Of course, I keep using it as like a landscape spread, but it's just a different shape than you normally have, and that's one of the things I like about it. The artist, of course, was Cicely, and occasionally what I will find, sometimes there'll be things on an altered book, there'll be things on the page already. Here we go, here's a good one. That is part of their paintings or their works, or maybe some art theory or art element teaching or something, that then becomes a basis of inspiration for how you can start a page. So if you have trouble with blank pages, or if you're just in a mood and you just need something that's not you starting from scratch, altered books are a wonderful way to work with that. I use them also to wipe off the extra paint on my brushes, or use up the extra paint off my palettes in my studio all the time. Start a base area, and then I can come back into this page anytime. I can already see a world that wants to form there. I just have to come back in and spend that time in that space, bring a little presence and a little bit of beauty. You're going to find a difference in the types of pages in your altered book choices. So I like to use thrift books, you know, secondhand books, that sort of thing. Shiny ones, again, I don't prep these. This is just kind of your regular coffee table book, shiny sheen sort of thing. I don't prep them, to be honest. The chipboard has a different kind of plastic film on it, and that's why it needed a little prep. This, I just go at it with my acrylics, my craft acrylics usually, to start that first layer. This is another one. It's a aromatherapy book or something that I had forever back when I was working in retail. Really liked the strange size of this. You've seen this if you've been on my YouTube or in some of my classes, probably. Again, these altered books, I come in and out of them over the years. Beautiful signature. You want to look for the sewn signature in altered books. If it's glued, it's going to be likely to come apart. Sewn signature is what's important. The shiny pages can work just fine. and actually quite well if you're using a real mixed media, a little bit of a thicker of a shiny page. This is an old photography book. This one, if you've been around with my stuff for a while, you've seen this one, images out of this. I adored making this book. It was a real pivotal transition point for me and some internal things, and holds a really special place in my heart. Trees are a symbol that means a lot to me. It already said a studio book in it. Isn't that lovely? And so I did lots of experimental things, lots of unfinished things are in here, and I used a lot of the imagery that was in this book from this old photography to inspire my own practice and process and seeing connections and playing with my own visual language. Altered books are wonderful for that. I brought this one. I've only used it a couple times in the last year. I brought it because it was an old history of painting book that I found. It has a slightly different paper to it, and this is important. It is a sewn signature, but it's old paper. It's really absorbent paper. It buckles a lot. I didn't really like using it as much as I thought I would in the book because it still feels thin, even with good layers of paint on it. But I am probably going to end up using some of these pages, pulling them out and using them as collage fodder in other things. Like I said, I like to keep little books that I might alter near me. This is one I've just been putting solid backgrounds in for probably 2 years, and now it's all filled. So now I have a book that is ready to use for little ideas, little quotes, little imageries. It's a perfect size to carry. That's the same thing I did with this one. I recovered both of those with some collage stuff to kept it really simple, and this one I almost filled, I think. And then this was a perfect size to carry, do small studies, small little meditations and prayers in, and little that sort of thing. When you find a book that has words in it, you can consider using that for an altered journal. I've known quite a few artists that do that, and this was one of those. There's so lots of words, it's all words. There's no imagery in this book. If you're somebody who loves words and where they lead you, or loves putting imagery around words, you can pull out the poetry on the page, whatever is speaking to you in the moment, and use that as the basis of what you center around, or what brings a little bit of an energetic sort of imprint to however you use that book. And of course you can tape things in, you can glue pages together in an altered book. If you want to make a thicker page to work on as well, you can also tear pages out so that as you build up thickness, it fits nicely still within that binding. Okay, and then this is just another example of a book that I had for a long time of symbolism and ritual and things like that, and I'm slowly filling in these pages with new art and new light, new imagery as I go. Put a little cover on it. There you have it. So I cannot say enough good things about trying out an altered book. If that appeals to you at all, try with words, with image, or something with both. If you love both, I think that you might just fall in love, and it could be a creative practice favorite in your world.